Welcome to the Smart Business Revolution.
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 You want a revolution?
You say you want a revolution?
Revolution. The revolution.
It's going on right now.
Welcome to The Revolution, the Smart Business Revolution podcast, where we ask today's most successful entrepreneurs to share the tools and strategies they use to build relationships and connections to grow their revenue. Now, your host for The Revolution, John Corcoran.
All right, welcome everyone. John Corcoran here, the host of the Smart Business Revolution podcast, where I talk with CEOs, founders, and entrepreneurs of companies and organizations like YPO, EO, Activation Blizzard, LendingTree, OpenTable, Axe Software, and many more. I also am the co-founder of Rise 25, where we help connect B2B business owners to their ideal prospects. And before introducing today's guest, I want to give a big thank you to Jason Gaynor of Mastermind Talks. I first met Craig, our guest today, at his great conference and community. So check that out, mastermindtalks.com, if you want to learn more about that great event and great community. But I'm excited today because my guest is Craig Handley. Craig is the author of the best-selling book called Hired to Quit, and he's got a funny bio, which I'm gonna change it up a little bit here because he's really proud of all the crazy life experiences he's had, which I'm gonna ask him about during this interview. But what's most notable in my mind, amongst all the other different things he's done in his life, is that he's the CEO and founder of ListenTrust, which has been ranked multiple times on the Inc. 500, 5,000 list. But right now they're doing about 150 million in sales for their clients. They answer hundreds of thousands of customer service calls and lead generation calls. And he employs close to 1,000 people from his home in Maine who are working thousands of miles away over in Mexico. So we're going to talk about how he manages to do that. He also recently started a new business, and in 60 days took that new business up to $600,000 in revenue in the midst of a pandemic, as we're experiencing right now, as we record this in August of 2020. But he's also had crazy experiences cage diving with great white sharks and jumping out of airplanes and meeting and hanging out with famous people like Richard Branson and Paul McCartney. And so we'll get into that in a second or two. But first, before we get into this interview, this episode is brought to you by Rise 25 Media. Rise 25 helps B2B businesses to get clients, referrals, and strategic partnerships and ROI with done-for-you podcasts and content marketing. You're probably listening to this podcast and thinking, should I start a podcast one day? But we say yes. We specialize with helping B2B businesses with a high client lifetime value to figure out exactly how to do that. So to learn more and get more inspiration and ideas about how you get clients, referrals, and great friendships from your podcast, go to rise25media.com or email us at support@rise25media.com. All right, Craig, I'm excited to talk to you because of your crazy, varied background. And I want to ask all about that. But first, you're a guy who sees opportunities and jumps for them. So you said that 10 or so years ago, 15 years ago now, I believe it was, you saw a hole in the market. You saw that there wasn't companies, lead generation companies or call center companies that were serving the Hispanic market. And so in spite of not being your background, you decided you'd go out and you would serve that. So tell me about how you approached that hole in the market.
I was out consulting with other call centers all over the country and helping people build successful call centers serving the U.S. market. And there was a lot of talk about the U.S. Hispanic market and how Hispanics, did they have the buying power? Did they have credit cards? Was there a market for it? And as I looked at the space, there were hundreds of call centers in the U.S. servicing, running soft offer, which are sales type centers servicing the English speaking market. But I couldn't even find any call centers that were experts at fielding sales calls for the direct response space. And so I thought, well, if there are 20 or 30 really good sales centers that can survive in the English market, maybe one sales center could survive in the Spanish. If there's all these other companies that are out there taking Hispanic calls outside of the sales focus, maybe a specialty shop for the Spanish market would be a good fit. I didn't speak Spanish. I did a little road trip and went to Tijuana and Juarez and Monterrey and Mexico City and Hermosillo. And in Hermosillo, Mexico, had 1 million people. and no call centers there. There weren't really any. And there was a small place that had it was like a sweatshop, and they were doing calls for Telcel, and they gave us 20 seats within their center, and we were off and running. And for the first 6 months, we struggled because everybody told me that, if you're going to work with Hispanics, you have to offer cash on delivery, COD. And so we'd have things kind of start to ramp, but then people wouldn't pay and stuff would end up being restocked. And it was a lot of up and down. And I finally, said, just get rid of COD. We're not going to do COD. It's either going to work or it's not going to work. And this was a bad idea, right? And it worked.
So walk me through what types of clients you were servicing then. Give me an example of one client you were helping from the beginning.
TV, like the NutriBullet, the Magic Bullet. We originally started off, our first client, I think, was Iceland Health, which is an omega-3 fish oil product.
Okay.
And that was maybe our first product we're taking calls on in the U.S. Hispanic market. They had dubbed their show that was very successful in English into Spanish, and we were trying to take that. So we kind of started off in that nutraceutical space. But what happened was we started competing with some U.S.-based centers that were also trying to do Spanish. And because we had built a sales philosophy with our agents, we literally would close at 60%, and they were closing at 25%. I mean, it wasn't even close. So any big center we were working with, they would just white label us essentially. And we do a revenue share on their clients that they referred to us. And that pushed us from, within 3 years, we were doing over 15 million in billing, and we made Inc. 500. Year over year, we had a 6,994% growth and made number 1 in business products and services and number 27 overall on the list of the Inc. 500. And it was just because we started off as a soft offer center selling, and that sales skill translated over to hard offers and trial offers. When I say hard offers, I mean the price is in the ad. Trial offers are try it now for $7.95, pay only shipping, and then you upsell them to a bigger price. And our agents were just salespeople. And so when we competed, we would just crush everybody we came up against. And over the years, we've actually turned it into both Spanish and English. We have a bilingual center. We've even trained, we have in Mexico, a group of Haitian refugees, and we train them to do French. And so we have a small group of French agents as well, which is kind of funny to find that in the middle of Mexico. We've seen a lot of success in our growth and been able to maintain that growth throughout the years.
Now, you served in the Army. Thank you for your service. And after that, you went from that to door-to-door sales and phone sales. Is that where you learned selling?
Yeah, I got accepted to Berklee College of Music, and it was my dream to go. So I joined the Army.
That's no easy thing.
No, and I joined the Army to pay for Berklee. And Berklee was $29,000 at the time, and so I couldn't afford it. So I joined the Army, and they gave me $750 a month, right? And that didn't pay for Berklee either. So I went to a local music school for 2 years, and they were like teaching me how to be a school teacher. And someone said, you should try sales. And so I did do door-to-door selling for 3 years.
3 years.
Was really good. Yeah, was really good at selling insurance door-to-door. And then I ended up at a call center. And in the call center, I was selling a lot more than, that. I got kind of addicted because there were so many inbound calls coming in. I got addicted to that sales process. So because I knew sales, I would write sales scripts. I would start training other people on how to write my sales scripts. I would do all kinds of crazy things. So that's where, I kind of started consulting outside of my call center world on how to build a call center, how to build a script, how to train agents.
Right.
And I ended up in that niche. I tell people I've forgotten more about sales than most people know.
You strike me as the kind of person who has different elements of your personality. On the one hand, you're a musician, you love comedy, you love performance. On the other hand, you spent time in the Army and you're good at sales. Which do you feel like you're just a combination of all these different things that makes up who you are? Or is there any one part of you that is stronger than the rest?
I just feel like I'm a creative guy, and creativity encompasses music. It encompasses sales. I look at things like, you've got your customer, and then you've got the goal of what you're trying to build, and then you've got the mechanism. And most businesses focus on the customer or the goal, and they think the mechanism is kind of a solid piece. Well, this is how we're going to do it. And they spend all their time trying to build a process out. But the reality is most things don't work on the process you plan to use. And so you need a creative brain to focus on the mechanism. And so I focus on the mechanism that gets the goals done for the customer. And that's oftentimes not going to be the same solution year over year. And I think that's really where my creativity has been my biggest strength. It's being able to look at problems with different types of solutions than most people would come up with, because the mechanism for me is always 100. It's just rolling through my brain, all these mechanisms. And that applies to music. If someone says, hey, write a song about any topic, I can come up with a song just right away.
Right. I love that. I consider myself a creative person as well. I joined my high school newspaper staff to be the cartoonist. There was a better cartoonist there, so I shifted to writing, and I found the same kind of creative expression from writing. But I also find that creative people a lot of times are not always as business savvy, or they sometimes counterbalance that by bringing in a business partner, perhaps. And you've managed to start a business that you founded up to, you have 1,000 people working for you. So how did do you feel like you are creative and you manage the business side as well? Or do you bring in business partners or operations people below you who then handle that kind of stuff? How have you managed to build up, be a creative person, and also build up this business and systematize it?
When I first started ListenTrust, I do have a business partner, Tony Ricciardi, who was, kind of the yin to my yang in a lot of ways. He would focus on a lot of the operational things that were going on. And in some of the new business I've started, I recognize that I know how to do operational things, and I'm really good with the structure and understanding the business side. And I know how to structure those meetings and structure those things, but I don't love doing it. And there's a lot of people that love being that operations person. And so now I just bring in smart operations people around me, usually 3 at a time. So that way I can funnel my creativity through those 3 people, and they just execute. And that allows me to be really focused on my creativity. But I've been in the operation side of thing, and I think done a really good job in those areas, but I recognize that that's not where my true talent lies and my passion. And so I've worked hard to stay away from those areas and bring in people that are more passionate about being operationally focused than I am.
How, 15 years ago when you started the business, how did you, we didn't have Slack, we didn't have Asana, we didn't have those sorts of things. Wi-Fi was less prevalent. How have you managed to run this business with so many people from thousands of miles away in Maine?
When we first started, I would spend a lot of time in Mexico, and Mexicans at the time were very process driven. So I remember having a meeting once saying, could you listen to calls? And I want you to tell me which calls are good, which calls are bad, what you liked about the calls, because I was trying to build training tools, like a training library. These are great greetings. These are greetings that are bad, right? So people could listen to the difference and understand.
Yeah.
And they listened to hundreds of recordings, and I got a spreadsheet, and it showed the recordings they listened to, and beside it, it just said good, bad, good, bad. There was no analysis done. There was no, they're like, well, you told us to listen to calls, and we did. And there wasn't even a report that told me these. It was basically, we listened to all the calls, and they were all good. I'm like, we don't itemize one at a time. They go, well, you told us to listen to calls, listen to good calls. So we listened to the 100 calls. I'm like, no, I needed feedback on every call. And I when I first started, it was, how do I create processes that are specific so they're doing what I expect them to do, not just doing what I tell them to do, right? There's a big difference in other countries in telling somebody what to do and having them understand what you really want done. And so I had to work hard at that in the beginning to set up those processes. We set up daily meetings. They were called 7-minute meetings. And we gave a bit of good news, and then we would go over the projects everybody was assigned. And if there was a stuck point, who they needed on the follow-up call. So not everybody had to be involved. So we started off doing daily 7-minute calls every day at 9 a.m., 6 a.m. Pacific. Everybody on the call, good morning, good news. The project I'm working on is here. I'm stuck here, and I really could use a meeting with Tom. Okay, great. Schedule that meeting with Tom. Next person. And so we got really efficient at working through meetings and making sure that we didn't take up everybody's time on the meetings, but we were able to track all the projects we needed to do in a very quick, informative session, a 7-minute call. And then those 7-minute calls led to, 4 or 5 calls with people throughout the day, but not everybody had to be involved, So I think that was a big push for us to kind of get the mindset set up the right way, as far as not just doing the job, but doing the job that was expected, beyond what's being said. And because we had those meetings on a day-to-day basis, we built the culture we wanted. A lot of it also came in building out our culture. The book I wrote is called Hired to Quit, and we actually started training our agents a few years back on how to quit and go find their dream job and live their dream life. And it actually lowered our turnover because we care so much about our employees. It lowered our turnover because most people have simple dreams: house, car, family vacation. And so we would literally we had 6 pillars of happiness where we would train them on what those pillars were and how to achieve them, which is financial security, being able to take time off with your family, health. There's different goals. And we would say, okay, we brought in nurses and we'd do blood work and we do all that for them during health week and set up contests for dieting, things like that. We bring up relationship advisors. Relationships, one of the pillars. And we bring in counselors that would meet with men about how to deal with women. And for women, we bring in counselors that would talk to them about how to deal with men, right? Because it's been different.
Mm-hmm.
And so we create this happiness around what we were doing for our employees and teaching them how to be happy and teaching them how to live their dream life. And we did have over 100 people quit and open restaurants, and one was a lawyer and he opened his own law office. And, we had people go work for the government and that was their dream job. And we had people go on trips that had never been on trips. And so we really helped a lot of people do that. And that really improved our culture to the point where nobody wanted to leave, so that was really important in our process as well. People really wanted to understand what we were about as a company so they could participate in the long run and be there forever.
Right. And, you certainly do lead by example. You've had some amazing life experiences, from, cage diving with great white sharks to snowmobiling across a live volcano, jumping out of, you were the 85th civilian in the world to jump out of a plane from over 32,000 feet, a halo dive it's called.
Yep.
And you've also hung out on Necker Island with Richard Branson. What did you learn from hanging out with Richard Branson? He does he has in the past done a lot of those kind of crazy stunts.
One of my favorite stories is the first time I met Richard. I went to it was called the Direct Marketing Association. He was speaking. And I went in the day before to look at how all the security was dressed. And I went to the Big and Tall store because I'm a big shouldered guy, former power lifter. Bought myself the same outfit. The next day he spoke, and I pretended like I was security and walked backstage and handed him my business card with $25 wrapped around it and said, "This is the first $20 we're going to make together." And he goes, "Oh, okay, brilliant. What do you have in mind?" And he put the 20 in his pocket, and I was like, I'm a marketer and I do a lot with charities. And he goes,
so you hadn't thought beyond that point? Like you just thought up to that point?
I talked fast, and I said we do a lot of work with charities, and I knew about his Virgin Unite, and I'm a musician, and I love how his music background, and I kind of mumbled my words, but he gave me his private email address. And I didn't know exactly how I was going to use it yet, but I had Richard Branson's email. Mm-hmm. And I had some ideas for Virgin Unite and emailed him, and he replied right away and passed me on to the Virgin Unite team. And then a few years later, I ended up going to Necker for a week, and I told him about it. And when I got to the island, I said, "I'm the guy with the $20." He goes, "I remember." And I said, I was surprised that you took my 20. He goes, "Let me give you your first lesson here on Necker Island." He goes, "You don't get to be a billionaire without taking people's money." He says, "Whether it's $20 or $2 million," he goes, "I take every dollar that's handed my way." He goes, "Lesson 1 of becoming a billionaire."
That is so funny. And did he, at any point, was he shocked that this guy who was working security at this conference showed up at Necker Island? Or at what point did he realize that you weren't actually a security guard?
Well, so those were years apart, right? The security guard thing was years apart. I think he realized it wasn't security. I think he's got such a great personality.
Yeah.
Like, he's as down to earth. Like, I imagine, like, I'm a big Patriots fan and a Tom Brady fan, and of course, everybody talks about how down to earth Tom Brady is. And Branson, I imagine Brady's a lot like Branson. Branson's so down to earth. I mean, his daughter owns a energy drink company, and it's pardon my language, but this is what it's called Pussy. And he's like, looks at me and goes, "Oh, would you like some pussy?" You know, and he thinks it's funny, and he hands me the energy drink, and and it's his daughter's brand, Holly's brand, and and he'll say, "How about some tequila with that?" And I'm like, "Well, it's breakfast." He goes, "Breakfast of champions." He says, "Pussy and tequila is the breakfast of champions, Craig." I mean, and he's just a regular guy with a funny sense of humor, and he loves adventure, and he loves, like, when people are crazy, he'll always challenge you to do something. Like, there was a guy, I wasn't there for this, but I saw the video from some of my other entrepreneur friends, that he thought he could kite surf, but he could jump off the roof of the Great House and make it across the island and land in the ocean and kite surf from there. And Richard's like, "Well, if you think you can do it, let's do it."
Jeez.
So they went up on the roof, and the guy jumped off the roof and did it. And Richard was he was impressed. And a lot of people forget he had a reality TV show that was made out of adventure. It was people doing crazy things.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think he believes in everything that he does, that you should live life to its fullest. And you experience that with him while you're there. The other thing he talks about is hiring people for culture, right? He's a big one on culture and finding people that are better and smarter than you. He's like, I forget how many companies he has, 50, 250, I forget what the number.
Yeah, I think maybe 200 or something, yeah.
250, I thought at the time.
Yeah.
And he says, in every company, I've hired someone smarter than me to run them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And he's like, I'm not afraid to admit my weaknesses and to make sure I'm hiring the right people around me. And, there were so many things that someone like that you can learn from. And a lot of what he talks about is, how do you save your own time? How do you make sure you can do the things you want to do in your life? And I think that's what Richard values the most, is entrepreneurs who figure out how to build a business without them having to work in that business 24 hours a day. And so if he sees you doing adventurous things and fun things and being able to come to Necker, I think he respects you more, and is more willing to give his time and his energy towards you when you're that type of individual.
Right,
I took his cell phone and put a song on his phone. I wrote a song called "I'm Filthy, I'm a Father You'd Like to Freak," kind of a joke song. And I made it his ringtone, so every time his phone would ring, it'd be like, "I'm filthy, I'm a father you'd like to." And I don't know if his daughter heard that or his son Sam heard it, but I'm sure that if they did, they were like, "Dad, what's that?" And he doesn't even know how I did it. I don't even remember how I got a hold of his cell phone and was able to load my song into it. I'm bold enough where I just said, "Hey, I just sent you a file. Could I let me hey, give me your phone. Okay, great. Here you go." That's who I am. I'm not afraid of much, and he's just such a regular guy.
Right. I'm curious, did you observe him conducting business at all when you were on Necker? Did you see him having meetings? I'm curious, like all these companies, I understand he has people that runs these companies, but he must have some kind of check-in process, maybe once a week, once a month, whatever, like he
was hanging out in his hammock. He was on his hammock with his laptop, and he was looking at slides from board meetings, and he would spend a couple hours a day, going through different things. But he was always kind of chilling on his hammock, going through the slides.
Amazing. Amazing.
Yeah, got one of those little lemurs on his shoulder, hanging out with him. Yeah.
That's crazy.
He must look like a cartoon character, right? He's, on his conference call, and the lemurs are hopping up on his shoulders. And, imagine being on those board calls.
It sounds surreal. It sounds like larger than life, like impossible, or like he's like doing it for the show, but it doesn't seem like that's the case.
That's who he is. I had so much, he was kite surfing, and one of the girls that was there said, "Oh, could we recreate," he's got a famous picture on his wall down there of a supermodel that was naked on his back, right?
Mm-hmm.
And kite surfing. And it's really famous. It's been in magazines, the pictures, and he's got the original picture kind of on his beach house down there where he stores all the kite surfing equipment. And one of the girls says, "I'd love to recreate that picture," and of course she kept her bathing suit on, but Richard says, "Let's go." So they went out, and she jumped on his back, right? And they did the thing, and he gets to shore, and I'm like, "Okay, it's my turn. I'm like, "Let's go." He looks at me and he goes, "We can try." He goes, "But I think we're going to drown." You know? But yeah, and then he dumped the ginger beer on my head, telling me how much he liked my music. And I actually have that video that I post sometimes here and there of how Richard drenched me with ginger beer.
That's funny. That's funny. I guess if Richard Branson drops a beer on your head, you don't get pissed.
No, I actually was going to pick him up and throw him in the ocean, but I'm like, I don't know how comfortable is he going to be if I throw him on my shoulder like a little rag doll and run him into the ocean?
You don't want to injure him.
Maybe he's going to say this guy could never come back, right? So
yeah, you didn't want to risk that.
Yeah, you tend to get really comfortable around him, though. You know, I mean, and every night when you're on the island, he's got a costume-themed party, and so you literally have to have a costume every night. One night it's a pirates party. The next night, I mean, he doesn't mess around with his costumes.
Yeah, I don't know how he continues to do that. Maybe it's like only a week, a month that he has groups like this that comes, but it doesn't seem like it. It seems like it's booked out, and he's, I couldn't imagine living that lifestyle all the time.
I think that he's got groups that are booked there, but I don't think, like, entrepreneurial groups is probably booked maybe 3 or 4 times a year with different groups.
Okay.
And I think he plays full out with entrepreneurs like that.
Yeah.
I think he has a ball. And I think the rest of the time he's a pretty private, secluded person. I mean, when I was I've been to both the new Great House and the old one. And the old Great House, I'm sitting at the bar in the same spot where Princess Diana sat, and just there's a piano there, and there's a piano that Janet Jackson played, and the before that Great House burned down, there were pictures of Princess Diana with her kids hanging out at the bar. And so kind of just a surreal.
So are you talking about after the hurricane hit it, or is this a different fire?
I was there before the hurricane hit.
Okay.
And the place burned. Then I've gone back since after to see the new Great House.
How is it after the hurricane? Because they had to completely rebuild the whole thing, right?
Yeah, it looks great. It's amazing, but some of that history, like there were these secret passageways that Richard had built. Like you go up this tiny set of stairs, and then you could actually stand above the room and listen to everybody above the room in this little hidden walkway. And then when you come out of the hidden walkway, he had this green, and he had a greenhouse over here, but he had greens where you could hit golf balls off the roof, right? And he had all these different, this target out in the middle of the ocean that you were aiming for. And, and then you would go up this ladder into the crow's nest that was up there and go really way up high, and you could see the whole island. But it was just in that little attic space. His kids he had old drum sets that his kids used to play, and just all this old stuff that I'm sure every piece of it, because of the people, Richard built that, to be a getaway for musicians originally, and so you could just imagine the stuff that he had in that little attic space. Like I always wanted to kind of like see your grandmother's attic. I always wanted to kind of go through all that stuff that's kind of hidden away. And it was just, that you're walking in places where so many amazing people kind of have spent time, especially when you're sitting at that bar, his little bar that was there. And he's got photos of other people sitting where you're sitting. And you're like, man, I've done something in my life to be sitting here where Desmond Tutu sat, Jimmy Carter has been right here. All these world leaders have been in the Great House. Yeah.
Obama went there like the week after he left office. He went straight there. It's funny. This is a fun topic. Any other observations or stories from that experience before I move on to asking about your most recent business?
Another great Richard Branson story is we were having dinner on the ocean, and he was cooking some, we were cooking chicken wings, things like that. And it was pirate night. And Richard goes, and he whistles really loud. And I'm like, what are you doing? He says, I'm getting my pet shark, going to throw him some chicken. I'm like, yeah, right. He goes, no. He goes, I got these 2 sharks. I raised them in my saltwater pool. And he goes, they swim with me every morning. I'm like, uh-huh. He whistles again. He throws some chicken in the water. And you look over, and there's a shark attacking the chicken.
Wow.
And there's 2 sharks. And apparently, and I was like, is this real? Apparently, Richard Branson has 2 pet sharks that live in the ocean. And they literally swim with him when he goes on his morning swim.
That's crazy.
You got to be pretty damn cool to have pet sharks that live in the ocean that actually know who you are.
He's like a cartoon character.
All these stories. I mean, when he talks about the number of times he near death going across the ocean in a balloon,
Yeah.
and I mean, he's probably, and then the time he actually scraped himself jumping from the Palm in Vegas. I mean, he tells
Yeah.
that story about how he was trying to raise publicity. It was really windy, and they're like, you'll be fine. He's like, all right, I'll be fine. He jumped off the building, and before he could pull his chute, he bounced it against the building because of the
Wow.
wind.
Wow.
He's like,
Yeah.
that was really scary. He goes, that was probably the closest I've come to death.
And I heard a story also about another time he was going to jump off of a building, and he actually went to the top, I think it was, and it was a windy day also, and he actually backed down. He actually, even though the press was there, it was supposed to be this big event, but he's, I respected that he did that because I think he decided like it just wasn't worth it, which is sometimes hard to make that decision.
Probably happened after the Palm event.
Probably, yeah. Yeah. So tell me, let's move on to socialclose.com. It's your most recent business. You decided, what the heck, we're in the midst of a global pandemic. I'm going to start a new business. But you ended up, tell us about what you do.
It's not quite how it happened. I actually wrote a book, Hired to Quit, and I did all the marketing myself. I created some music videos. I had a friend interview me about the book, and I created all these little interviews, and I would drive traffic to it by direct messaging people that was within my network and saying, hey, could you buy my book and share this message? And over the launch that I did, and I had a couple people help me, I ended up selling enough books to make 5 bestseller lists on Amazon. And I probably would have made a New York Times bestseller list, a USA, a Wall Street Journal. I just didn't know that I needed to sell 40 Nooks. And, there's different rules around making the New York Times. And I sold 5,000 to 8,000 books, I think, on my pre-launch, and I made 5 bestseller lists. And I did it all myself. And being somebody who does do some coaching and some consulting, and I'm a musician, and I do comedy, and I'm like, and I wanted to keep selling my book. I'm like, I need to figure out social media because it's hard. So I went out and I tried to find someone that would edit all of my old content and create new content. And the initial thing was $15,000, and then they wanted $7,500 a month to continue to do my editing and creating content. And then there was somebody who was going to manage my community and post, and they wanted $5,000 a month. And someone to book me on podcasts was $5,000 a month. And then someone else was going to run my LinkedIn program for me for $5,000 a month. And then and I'm just looking at the cost of all this, and I'm like, well, that's like $30,000. Not much I can do, right? I'm not going to spend $300,000 or $360,000 a year on social media. And then I said, well, maybe I can build it myself. So I hired a full-time person. I hired a full-time digital person in Mexico to do all my editing and things. And I hired a third person to manage my communities. And I basically had an assistant I would shovel everything to, and then she would do lyric videos, and she would take content, and she would post it different places, and someone else was replying and managing and actually doing direct messages to people to drive them back to the content. And I was having great success. And I saw another friend of mine post on Facebook, does anybody do this? And outside of a few solutions like I found, like, yeah, they do this for 15,000 and whatever, everybody was typing following. And I'm like, that's really interesting. Maybe I built a business. So I put packages together, and I think I'm giving away like $30,000 worth of value for about $5,000. And my goal was, how many people can I help? Right? I want to help a lot of people, and I want them to be able to do social media as a base for marketing. I think marketing involves buying media, right? Buying Facebook ads, buying programmatic media, and doing other things outside of just posting, right? But I think that if you have a good, strong base of content, that it takes 20 times on average for someone to be bought into your service, right? So if I can create great content and drive traffic to that content, which drives into your social page, and on your social page, if you have 20 pieces of great content and people can go down the rabbit hole, right, you could have one ad create 20 views, lowering your cost of acquisition in both joint venture marketing or your JV partnerships, in your programmatic, in your Facebook. And so I said, I started charging $10,000 for consulting, and most people didn't have a team that could execute on my ideas. So I said, well, I've got a team. Let me put this together. And so I've got a team that does all the posting. They do the direct messaging. They do all the engagement back and forth. And I started doing it. Like, I posted on Facebook, is anybody interested? Within 24 hours, I had 4 people send me money. All 4 of them referred 3 people or more to me. And within 60 days, I had 37 people I was working with, 23 people I had to hire to keep up with the growth, and almost 600,000 in revenue, all in 600,000 annually. But it was all built up in that 60-day period of just, anybody want this? And I'm just now 60 days into it. I finally sent a contract template to my lawyer and said, hey, I need contracts. Some of my 37 clients want a contract. I just last week set up a bank account. It was all going to my personal account. I'm like, I probably should get a bank account. Right? I'm like, I guess I need it. And I'm doing a merchant account finally, because everybody's been sending me checks, snail mail or Venmo or PayPal. I'm like, man, if I were an actual entrepreneur, I might figure out some of this execution stuff.
Well, in many ways, you're a consummate entrepreneur because you shoot first, aim later, right?
Yeah, like I said, I know the operation stuff. I said this earlier in the call. I just don't like it, and so I've been able to function on all the execution stuff. But for me, what's really important is, are my clients happy with the content I'm helping them create and directing them to create, and my team is creating for them? Are they happy with that? And is it creating results? I call the business social close. And we've had success in a way. Like a friend of mine, I've got a quote on my website, but Benjamin Hardy did a book, Personality Isn't Permanent, and he needed 2,000 book sales in 48 hours to make New York Times, or he wasn't going to make it. And we had him create a video message telling people why they should buy the book. And he says, I'm not too proud to ask for your help. I need 2,000 books in 48 hours. And we sent out that message, direct messaged over 2,500 people a day for the next 2 days. That's across all 3 platforms. And we ended up selling over 3,000 books in 2 days, and he made the list. Another woman, Anna David, on the day of her launch, she ran out of paperbacks on Amazon because we had sold so many. So she had to go 30 hours with only selling the digital version of her book because she had run out of paperbacks.
Wow.
She got podcast interviews, and she got people to write about her book. She even got invited to Good Morning America and ended up being on the show like a week into her launch on a Thursday morning. Did a segment on Good Morning America. And a lot of this stuff, a lot of the things that were working come from creating great content and driving traffic to it.
Now,
and it worked.
I'm a big fan of direct messaging too. I use it all the time to connect with people, but a lot of the platforms restrict the amount of messaging you can do. How did you overcome that?
So that's a good question. If you have a lot of people in your network, you can send up to 100 cold messages a day, right, per platform.
Per platform.
And then people that are within your network, because I have 5,000 or 6,000 people in my LinkedIn network, for example, which isn't a ton, but Ben, I think, had 10,000. And so you're able to send up to 500 or up to 1,000, in each one. Maybe it's 500 in LinkedIn, and you can send up to 1,000 in Instagram, in your network, people who are in your network, and 100 new requests. And then on Facebook, it's not necessarily the amount you send, it's the timing in between your messaging. So Facebook, you're supposed to wait 1 or 2 minutes in between messages. And so it's not that it's easy work. It's just that.
This requires discipline.
Just what are you trying to accomplish? Is it worth doing? And we've done movie premieres, documentaries where we filled movie seats, to watch a documentary with the guy who the documentary is about, and done a Zoom call after, for a $20 donation to a charity. And we've done, we've done restaurants where we notified people on an outreach program, direct messaging program, that their favorite artist was performing to get the reservations in, and sold out restaurants. And
now, how do you message? I receive those types of messages on social media all the time for someone who's trying to sell something. How do you do it in a way that is persuasive and isn't like you're just trying to pitch someone that you haven't messaged in months or years?
You want the secret sauce, huh?
Yeah, of course. Everyone does.
Oh boy. So here's the secret sauce. So the first thing that we send is a picture. We don't send a video message, and there's very little text, and it's a picture. And so I actually, for my social close business, if I'm recruiting authors, I have a picture of me holding my plaque up here, and then I've got a picture of making the bestseller list, and the message says, hey, I think there's some things we can do together. I figured out a pretty cool way to sell books. They say a picture tells 1,000 words.
Mm.
So as opposed to getting, to writing 1,000 words that you're never going to read anyway, I put this cool picture collage together. And if you want to connect, we can talk more later. Thanks.
Mm.
And so I set up the intrigue, right? Like a mystery with a picture. And most people don't send a picture.
Yeah.
So every time I send a picture, they go, oh, well, that's cool.
Different.
Right?
Yeah.
When they connect, which a good percentage do, I go easy on the text and I send a video. And the video is created as if I grab my cell phone on the fly and I said, yo, John, thanks for connecting with me. So here's what I've done. And I basically took the story I just told about me being an author and building out my team. And my team has edited that 4-minute description down to about 1:45. And so they kind of get the punchlines into it and explain how, as an author myself, what I went through and how I built the business. And we've actually built a 2-week, 4-week, 8-week, and 12-week book launch. And it's been depending on how many followers you have. If you don't have any, I want you for 12 weeks if you want me to sell your books. But if you've got 10,000 followers, I can sell 3,000 to 5,000 books in a week.
Wow.
So, and I've built out that process, and it's not overly expensive, and so people, I mean, it's less than $1 a book, really, when I break down the price. And so, I'm trying to help people and trying to help them create their influencer circle, help them get more speaking gigs. I mean, help them get more articles written about them, more podcasts, things like that. And I've definitely overachieved. I'm still surprised myself at how well it works.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I always say when everyone else is zigging, you should be zagging. And it sounds like that's what you're doing effectively here. So
again, I'm looking for the mechanism to create the solution I'm looking to create, and engagement through LinkedIn, Instagram. I'm a songwriter. I've gone in and I've messaged everybody with over 2,000 followers that has ever used the hashtag songwriter gets a message from me. And the message talks about how my passion is music. I'm looking to connect with other artists, and I'm a writer and I'd love to collaborate with them. And it's a simple 1.5-minute video message. And as a result, my Instagram is growing like crazy, and I'm growing it with musicians. I also now have started to target digital entrepreneurs or digital marketers, because I think our call center does great with customer service and sales. And the more digital marketers I create. And so
what are the Instagram, and just tell everyone the Instagram handles that people should go check out.
Oh, I'm at Craig Handley.
Craig Handley. Okay.
Yeah,
Any
Facebook,
other ones?
I'm Craig Handley. LinkedIn, I'm Craig Handley.
Any other ones they should follow?
I don't use Twitter that much, but I'm Craig A. Handley on Twitter. But everything I have is Craig Handley, except for Twitter. I got Craig A. Handley. But.
Cool. All right. Well, we're running a little short on time here, Craig. This has been great going through your background here. I want to wrap things up. This is a question that I always ask, which I neglected to warn you beforehand about this, but I think you'll be able to handle it. So let's pretend we're at an awards banquet, much like the Oscars or the Emmys, and you're receiving an award for lifetime achievement for everything you've done up until this point. What we all want to know is, who do you thank? Who are the mentors? Who are the friends? In addition to family and friends, who are the gurus, the icons, the entrepreneurial CEOs? Who are the people that you would acknowledge in your remarks?
Well, the first one would be Glenn Reed. Most people don't know who Glenn is, and he's getting older in his years. But I used to sell insurance door to door, and he's the first person that ever really bought into the fact that I might be able to do something special. And he co-signed for a $3,500 credit card with me when we first started, and he was my first business partner way back when I was 21 years old and had no idea what the hell I was doing. He co-signed. First time I ever left, outside of the military, but I remember I had this $3,500 credit card, and I just went on this road trip to Nebraska and to Colorado, and then I ended up flying into LA, and I was like, I can't believe I'm in LA. I can't believe I'm in Las Vegas. Just places that I never dreamt I'd ever have a chance to visit when I was a kid. And Glenn was the first one that did that. Then there's a guy named Bob Heeks. And again, these are personal mentors to me. I had built a business with Glenn, and Bob brought it to big call centers, and it was an upsell behind other phone sale products. And I was making 50 cents per sale per member per month. And what we didn't expect was MasterCard and Visa to start charging back. If it was 6 months, they would fine us for 6 separate incidents. Today they wouldn't do that, but we were the first ones doing monthly billing, and basically I was charging $16 a month for a non-insurance health program, and we were paying a $40 bounty at $8 per member per month. So when the fines started coming in, it became difficult to run that business, and I think I got the check for like $80,000, and my next check was supposed to be like $250, and Bob said to me, Craig, we're not going to pay you. And he was running this on behalf of like the big call center. They were kind of the boss. And he goes, you have a contract, you could sue us. And you'd be right to say that there's some money owed to you. He goes, but your pile of money is only this tall and our pile of money is this tall. He goes, what I think you should do is remove yourself gracefully and build an alliance and build an ally, be allies with this call center. And I'll be an ally of yours. And I'll help you as much as I can so we can grow outside of this. And so I walked away from what I thought I was owed, right? And now that I know a lot about business, I know it was the right decision. But back then, your ego is just, you're like, well, that money's mine. But they weren't making any money, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, they were paying in fines more than they were bringing in revenue. Mm-hmm. And so for me, it was the right decision. And Bob has been a friend of mine for over 20 years now. And he's always been somebody who I can count on for great advice. He's always been someone who's always going to be in my corner. And he did help me. He paid my phone bill for like the first 2 years when cell phones came out. And my phone bill was like $2,400 a month. He was like, I can't believe I'm paying your phone bill.
Jeez.
So, I mean, those are two people that most people don't know about. But then, like Yannick Silver was the first one to invite me to Necker. And he taught me that business is designed to be played hard and fast. Right? And you're supposed to have fun. And you build a business so you could live a big life. You're an entrepreneur, not so you can work your ass off, but so you can enjoy the finer things in life. Mm-hmm. And that was Yannick. And he really shaped, a lot of the things that I do. The culture, a lot of the culture stuff was Janet Atwood and Chris Atwood, who wrote The Passion Test, and then meeting and having sessions with Tony Hsieh from Zappos. He was really drilled into me culture. And Joe Polish is somebody who I can't speak highly enough of who Joe Polish is as a human being and as a mentor and just someone who's done amazing things. And of course, I'm forgetting other people. Like my business partner, Tony, is somebody who I'd be remiss not to mention. Mm-hmm, What I guess I'm really saying is any entrepreneur who's done anything probably has a list that's pretty damn long. I could keep going and all the people that I'm so grateful that they took time to share their energy and their love and their experience with me. Mike Lally is another one that, again, most people don't know Mike, but he had a big company. And from a business standpoint, this guy knew how to build a business and how to run meetings and how to, build out forecasts. And Cameron Harold has been a coach and a mentor. I don't want to forget anybody. That's a horrible question.
Well, I think the orchestra is playing now, so you're.
Who's your favorite kid? I'm like, okay.
That's a great list.
I can tell you, and it depends on the industry. Paul Tuivai in the music industry, he worked with Universal for 18 years, and he's been a mentor of mine in the music space. And God, the list of people who have helped me, and I think this is true for anybody listening, is if your list of people who have helped you isn't as big as mine, then you're doing something wrong. Yeah. You should always strive to be the dumbest guy in the room. And I am grateful that I've, in most cases, been able to be one of the dunces that's sitting in any room with the amazing minds and that's my approach. I think everybody around me is probably smarter than me in some area. And so I just want to learn from them.
Yeah. Well, Craig, this has been great. Remind everyone where they can go check out and learn more about you.
ListenTrust.com is the call center. Socialclothes.com is the social media company. I'm all over. I'm easy. If you Google Craig Handley, I think I even have my cell phone on the internet because I don't care, and pretty easy, accessible. Love to talk to new people and help people. And so that, I think that's pretty easy to find me.
All right, Craig, it was a pleasure. Thanks so much.
Thank you for listening to the Smart Business Revolution podcast with John Corcoran. Find out more at smartbusinessrevolution.com. And while you're there, sign up for our email list and join the revolution.
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 And be listening for the next episode of the Smart Business Revolution podcast.